So the theme of this first session is anchoring. Anchoring is a quality of, well, we talk about dropping anchor, don't we? The dropping anchor. And when we stop and pause and be still and turn our attention to our present moment experience, it's an expression of dropping anchor into the present moment. So, and it's curious because there's a sense perhaps of intentionality in dropping anchor. You kind of have to take the anchor, it might be quite heavy, and kind of launch it, but then it has its own momentum as it drops towards the ground. A sense of gravity taking the attention, taking the anchor rather to the ground or to the seabed. And in the same way, by dropping our bodies into the present moment, our bodies may also be quite heavy. And there's a sense perhaps of allowing a physical anchoring to happen. It's more than just our body anchoring. There's also a quality of anchoring our minds, which may be actually a slightly more tricky affair than taking our seat with our bodies. In that the mind tends not to stay anchored. It tends to be an anchor that flies about. Some of you may be familiar with some of the kind of phrases that get applied to our attention, monkey mind, butterfly mind. That quality of kind of actually of lightness rather than heaviness in many ways, because it kind of flies about all over the place. And when we're identified with that mind that flies around, it means that all of us are, we're completely flying around with it. And in some sense, we're not really in charge of what's going on, because we're at the mercy of wherever it takes itself. And it does take itself. It's not generally that we are consciously moving it around. It's on automatic pilot. And so one of the first steps of mindfulness training is actually to give the mind something to land on, something to anchor to, some kind of ground. And there's lots of different possibilities for this. Traditionally, our own breathing is frequently used as an anchor. So commonly, meditation practices will make use of the fact that we've got a breath kind of already made for attending to. There are lots of advantages of using the breath as an anchor. It's portable, it goes with us wherever we go. It's always there, because if we're alive, we're breathing. It's something that's tangible within the body, so there's a sense of a feeling tone to the breath. And also that it is actually in our bodies, because generally speaking, the mind that wanders has a tendency to go up into thinking, kind of up into the abstract, or to fly almost as if it's not connected to the body. And so by anchoring to something that's inside the body, such as breathing, there's a coming home that can happen, a unification of mind and body. So it's a centering place to go to. Also, the breath kind of mirrors life in the sense that we have some control over it. We can actually manipulate our breath, but we don't have total control over it, as you'll discover if you try to hold your breath for, a minute or two. So it happens partly out of our control and partly in our control. So it's a kind of a sort of metaphor for how we can work with life in our coming to rest on the sensations of the breath. So it's a good option, but it may not be the best option for everyone all the time. So for some people, the breath can actually be quite a difficult place to go to, either because of maybe some breathing condition or something historical, which makes the breath actually not a comfortable place to go to. And in this case, we can choose a different anchor. And it might be another place in our bodies, such as, for example, the feet, or the hands, or the feeling of sitting, or somewhere else if you choose. Generally, it's a good idea to choose somewhere that's perhaps neutral. That's not a particularly unpleasant place to go. So if maybe there's a place in your body that feels neutral or somewhat inviting to rest in. Or it's also perfectly workable to choose an external anchor if an internal anchor isn't best for you at a particular moment. And that could be the experience of sounds, whatever sounds are coming into awareness at any particular moment, or it could be an object that you see. It could be a visual anchor that you train on. So we can use any of our senses to receive the experience of an anchor: seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting and smelling, if you like. And by choosing a sensory anchor, we are coming back to the present moment, because our senses are always in the present moment. Whereas thinking, though it happens in the present moment, often takes us away from the experience of the present moment and into fantasy or imagery or plans or memories. So it seems to be helpful to retrain ourselves to come back to an anchor in the present moment and to watch what happens when we do that. And very often what we discover is that, the mind wanders off again. And that in itself is instructive, because if we're choosing to place our attention at an anchor, then we will notice, or we're more likely to notice when it wanders off. Whereas if we don't actually have an anchor to pay attention to, we'll just go with the wandering and see that as just kind of the normal state. We won't even notice it's the normal state of things. It will just happen. But when we make the intention to pay attention to an anchor and the mind wanders away and we go, oh, hang on a minute, I'm not with my anchor anymore, then we've already disidentified from where the mind has gone to. So that's actually a moment of mindfulness. And some people kind of beat themselves up when they find their mind has wandered. So I'd really encourage you to, rather than to beat yourself up at that moment, to go, oh, wow, look at that. I've noticed that my mind went somewhere else. That's fantastic. And in that moment, we have a choice point, which is that having noticed it, we can, in awareness, that awareness that's arisen, we can choose to bring it back to the anchor. And then it becomes a kind of a dance. The mind wanders away and we bring it back. The mind wanders away and we bring it back. And we get to see what goes on around that anchor, which is shows us, importantly, how things are in our minds and bodies. We get to learn and become familiar with our patterns. And at the same time, we're coming back and training ourselves to return to attention, to a chosen place of attention. So there's a sense of cultivating intentionality as we notice what's going on. So just in this simple, I imagine many people, perhaps not everyone, but many people who have had some experience of being invited to practice mindfulness of breathing or mindfulness of an object as a meditation practice. And it seems like it's a really kind of, there's not much going on there. It's just, you put your mind somewhere, it wanders away, you bring it back. But actually there's lots going on there that we can tune into and learn from, and skills that can be cultivated just from this. So this is why having an anchor is such a foundational, having anchors is such a foundational part of meditation practice, and generally is introduced near the beginning of a training. Okay, so I think that's probably enough said. How about we see what happens when we actually practice it? So